And because this great armament is approaching them, some of the Greek captains either they start losing their nerve or they start deliberately backing the water. They start backing the water, and this actually ends up drawing the Persian ships further and further in. And different Greek cities provided different accounts of how the Battle of Salamis actually started. The Athenian account is that the whole of the Greek fleet is backing the water. It's an Athenian trireme commanded by an individual known as Amenias of Pallene, who sort of takes the initiative. He gets fed up of backing the water, and he makes a dash towards a Persian ship and rams it. However, his ram then ends up getting stuck in the Persian ship, and so it requires his Athenian compatriots to sort of engage the rest of the Persian ships in an attempt to sort of protect him while he extricates himself from ramming this ship. And so, obviously, in the Athenian version of the battle, the Athenians are sort of the people who instigate it, who take the initiative as the rest of the Greeks are backing away. The Aeginetan account, however, is that the battle only begins when the ship that sends for the sons of Aeacus comes back with the remains of the heroes. And as the ship comes back, while the Greeks are backing off, a phantom of a woman actually appears and cries out in full view of the Greek fleet, "Men possessed, how long will you still be backing water?" And this inspires the Greek fleet to begin the engagement and to fight the Persians. Now, whether or not the Aeginetan or the Athenian account is the one that actually happened, the battle ends up starting anyway. And very quickly, the Persian cohesion begins to disintegrate, because bearing in mind, the Persians had been rowing throughout the night, patrolling the strait, and also ferrying troops onto the islet of Sitalia. So the oarsmen are much more tired than the Greek fleet, who had been resting there since the Battle of Artemisium. And
not to mention, those guys would also have been resting on land. We discussed this in our Ionian Revolt episode. That was actually what caused the Ionian Navy to suffer catastrophic losses as well, was the fact that their rowers and sailors were just completely exhausted and were forced to be at sea for days at a time.
And this fatigue can't be sort of stressed enough, because obviously rowing a trireme is very hard work. And when you're already fatigued and tired from the night before, all of your the movements of your vessel effectively depends on coordination and sort of resilience and physical ability of each of the rowers that are in the banks of oars. So when these rowers are tired, your maneuvers become a lot.
The maximum ramming speed, right, like of a freshly laid crew, right, freshly rested, fully supplied with breakfast, the maximum speed they can sustain for like a very small amount of time is a speed of 9 to 10 knots, which is about 10 to 11.5 miles per hour. And that would be the most effective ramming speed. And if you're not able to generate that speed, right, because as the battle goes, even the rowers will not be able to maintain that speed, you will then have to result in destroying the ships through boarding actions or slicing off the oars. And the Persians are already now starting at a disadvantage on this key parameter.
Yeah. When you're already tired, all of your ship's maneuvers become a lot less deft, a lot less quick. There's more delay, because not only are the bodies weary, but the minds are also weary as well, because they'd obviously been sailing around aimlessly because of Themistocles' letter during the night. And so because the Persians are at a disadvantage and their numbers are being sort of mitigated in the strait, the front ranks, who are currently being on the assault of the Greek triremes, so they begin to pull back. And when one ship's pulls back, then the ship next to it has to pull back to save themselves, and so on and so on. And this causes chaos in the Persian lines, as there are also ships in the Persian rear trying to eagerly press ahead because they want to impress King Xerxes, who's watching the entire battle.
Just remember, folks, the movie he was watching it before he turned and walked away.
Yeah. At, Xerxes is watching this entire battle play out from a sort of hill known as the Horns to the Greeks. He's overlooking the battle on this golden throne. He's even putting his feet up because he has a little footstool. And surrounding him are all of his secretaries and civil servants who are jotting down the names of all the commanders who are distinguishing themselves. And conversely, all of the commanders who are also not so good a job. So, in the front of the Persians, you have all of them. You have the ships trying to escape and save themselves and their vessels, and from behind you have all of sort of Persian vessels trying to press ahead and get into the action because they want to make a name and distinguish themselves to the king.
And not to mention that the Greek ships are also now pushing in.
Yeah, and the Greek ships are pushing in, and they've managed to maintain their formation, and they are fighting in a line. So they are able to support each other. If one of their ships gets rammed, they can counter-ram it. They can shower the Persian ships with missiles, and they can maintain their formation really well. And they've maintained this formation in line so well that in Plutarch's account, the Greek commanders are actually able to taunt one another by shouting insults towards their fellow ships that are not fighting enough, they're not sinking enough Persian ships. So this is then what happens to Themistocles. I think some Aeginetan or captain or whatever ends up just taunting Themistocles from his side.
I would also add that in the opening barrage, or like the opening stage of this battle, Persian naval command, especially who were on, the Greek left, right? So that would have been where the Athenians had positioned themselves at the start of the battle. That was also commanded by Aryabanges, the brother of the great king. And he was killed pretty early,
Yeah,
which, according to Plutarch, was killed by Amenius and uh, Sophocles, with Amenius also being the brother of the playwright, uh,
yeah,
who we just mentioned, who fought as well.
yeah,
And and according to Plutarch as well, it was his body floating around, and Artemisia was the first to notice it. But this completely destroyed unit cohesion on the Persian right, which was crewed by the Phoenicians. And you could easily argue that they are the most experienced sailors.
yeah,
The Greeks are going to be boarding Persian ships throughout the line, with the 14 to 15 hoplites in the lead, all fully heavily armored infantry. Whereas the Persians melee infantry that are going to be there, the marine equivalents, they're going to be light infantry, because Persia is just taking troops from whatever satrapy that they originate from. And most of the times, these guys are lightly equipped because of the nature of the geography and terrain back at their native lands.
yeah. And Herodotus also makes the point that the Persians also can't swim. So obviously they'd want to save their vessels and make it back to the lines, because if their ship gets sunk by an Athenian, they're all basically screwed.
I really wonder why he would even claim that, when considering Phoenicians,
Yeah,
Cretans, and Egyptians were like, what, more than half of the Persian fleet. And, they're seafaring people already.
yeah.
They probably would know to swim.
It's definitely a strange one. He might be referring to Persian Marines or whatever. But command and control for Persia basically ends up getting totally thrown into disorder. Obviously, because Persian admiral gets killed, Xerxes, commander in chief, is watching from a hilltop, and obviously he can't just like send messages over to his commanders to tell them what to do. So each individual Persian commander, and similar to the Greeks, is left to their own devices. However, it is worth bearing in mind that the Athenians are fighting for their liberty and to avenge the burned temples on their Acropolis, while the Persians are fighting for their personal gain. I mean, the Greeks individually are also somewhat fighting for their own personal gain because they keep taunting each other that they're not winning enough glory. or killing enough Persians. However, behind that, all that bravado, they are fighting for their very survival, and there is nowhere else for the Greeks to run. So they are extra
And
motivated.
would